The mountains didn't care about his net worth. They didn't care that Robert Sterling had just sold his tech firm for 9 figures, or that he was wearing a $5,000 Italian suit entirely inappropriate for a hike. The mountains only cared about the wind, the cold, and the silence. Robert gripped the handle of his leather weekender bag tighter, his knuckles turning white. He stood at the edge of the dirt path, staring up at the cabin. His cabin. He hadn't visited this place in 3 years. Not since the divorce. Not since the heart attack that nearly killed him 2 months ago. Oh. Total rest, the doctor had said. Go somewhere where the Wi-Fi is weak, or you won't live to see 50. So here he was. But something felt off. He frowned. The front porch was swept clean. There was a rocking chair he didn't recognize, and on the windowsill, a small glass jar filled with wildflowers caught the afternoon sun. Robert felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not the heart attack, just anger. He walked up the wooden steps. Creak, creak. The sound was heavy in the silent valley. He didn't take out his keys. The front door was slightly ajar, swaying gently. "Hello, Robert," called out. His voice was rusty, unused to shouting. No answer. Just the soft sound of something humming. He pushed the door open. The scene that met his eyes froze him in place. It was like walking into a painting he hadn't commissioned. The massive stone fireplace was crackling with a small, efficient fire. The air didn't smell like dust. It smelled of lavender soap and boiling soup. And there, standing in the middle of his living room, was a woman. Young, exhausted, wearing a faded cardigan, mended a dozen times. In her arms, she cradled a baby. Standing next to her, clutching a battered doll, was a little girl with hair the color of straw. They looked at him. He looked at them. For 10 seconds, the only sound was the popping of the firewood. The woman's face went ghost white. She pulled the baby closer, shielding the little girl behind her leg. "You're Robert started," his voice sharp, the voice of a CEO. "You're living in my home?" The woman swallowed hard. "Please," she whispered, her voice brittle like dry leaves. "Please, sir, don't call the police. We didn't break anything, I swear." Robert stepped fully into the room. He dropped his heavy bag. Thump. The little girl jumped. She squeezed her doll so hard her knuckles turned pink. "Who are you?" Robert demanded. "And how did you get in here?" "The window in the back." The woman stammered, tears welling up. The latch was broken. It was snowing. 2 weeks ago. The shelter was full. My car ran out of gas. We had nowhere else. "So you just moved in?" Robert asked. He looked around. His expensive leather sofa was covered with a knitted blanket he didn't own. It was cleaner than his penthouse, but that wasn't the point. "This is trespassing," Robert said, reaching for his phone. "This is a felony." "No, please." The woman stepped forward. "My name is Rose. This is Lily. And the baby is Sam. I'll leave. I promise. We'll leave right now. Just, please, don't call the cops. If they take me, they'll put the kids in foster care." Robert looked. He looked at the baby, oblivious and warm. He looked at the little girl, Lily, She held that broken doll up like a shield, as if a stuffed toy could protect her from a millionaire's wrath. Robert felt a throb in his temple. The doctor's voice echoed. Avoid stress. Keep your blood pressure down. He looked at his phone. 0 bars. I can't call the police even if I wanted to, Robert muttered. The signal is dead. Rose let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Thank you. We'll go. Lily, get your coat.
Mommy, the little girl whispered, tugging on Rose's skirt. Is the bad man going to make us sleep in the car again?
The question hung in the air. Heavy. Suffocating. The bad man. Robert flinched. He had been called a shark. A ruthless negotiator. But bad man coming from a 5-year-old hit differently. He watched Rose frantically trying to pack. She looked weak. Her hands were red and chapped. She moved with a limp. Wait, Robert said. Rose froze. Sir, it's dark, Robert said, glancing out the window. The temperature is plummeting. And your car is out of gas. We'll walk, Rose said, though her voice wavered. It's only 5 miles to town. 5 miles. In near-freezing temperatures. With a baby and a lame leg. Robert looked at the fire. He looked at the soup bubbling on the stove. It smelled like chicken and rosemary. His stomach grumbled. He looked at the little girl's doll again. The missing arm had been replaced with a stick, a small, carefully carved twig tied on with a red ribbon. It was resourceful, desperate, heartbreaking. Robert sighed, rubbing the scar on his chest. Stop packing, he grunted. What? I said stop. You can't walk 5 miles in the dark with kids. You'll freeze, and I don't need that on my conscience. So we can stay. Rose asked, barely a whisper. For tonight, Robert said sharply. He put up a finger. One night. You take the guest room downstairs, I take the master suite. Tomorrow morning, I'm driving into town. I'm dropping you off at the bus station. Understood? Rose looked like she wanted to collapse with relief. Yes. Thank you. You won't even know we're here. I better not, Robert muttered. He picked up his bag and headed for the stairs. But at the landing, he stopped. And Rose. Yes, sir. That's soup, Robert said, not looking back. Is there enough for one more? There was a long silence. Yes, Rose said softly. There's plenty. Robert nodded and disappeared upstairs. He entered his master bedroom. It was cold. He walked to the window. He watched his reflection in the glass. The blue suit. The tired eyes. The man who had everything and nothing. Downstairs, he heard a soft giggle. The little girl. He hadn't heard laughter in his house in years. He took a pill, swallowed it dry, and loosened his tie. One night, that was the deal. He would give them a warm bed and then get back to his solitary recovery. He had no idea that one night was about to turn into the most complicated negotiation of his life. Dinner was a study in silence. I sat at the head of my own dining table, a place I hadn't occupied in 3 years. The wood felt cold under my forearms. Across from me, Rose sat perched on the edge of her chair, looking ready to bolt at any second. The baby was asleep in a laundry basket near the hearth. And Lily was watching me. She sat next to her mother, her small chin barely clearing the table edge. She hadn't touched her soup. She was just staring at me with those wide, unblinking blue eyes, clutching her one-armed doll. The only sound in the room was the wind howling outside, rattling the window panes like a jealous ghost, and the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of my silver spoon hitting the porcelain bowl. I took a sip. It was incredible. Just chicken broth, potatoes, and rosemary. Simple peasant food. But it tasted like time. It tasted like someone had stood over the pot for hours, stirring, caring. "It's good," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. Rose flinched. "Thank you, sir. It's just whatever was in the pantry, and some herbs from the winter garden." "You found herbs under 2 feet of snow?" I asked. "I dug for them," she whispered. I looked at her hands. Her knuckles were raw, the skin cracked and red. She had dug through frozen earth just to season a soup for a stranger. I felt a twinge in my chest. I ignored it. Empathy was expensive. "Eat," I said to Lily. "It's getting cold." Lily didn't move. "Are you a king?" she asked. Rose gasped. "Lily." "Hush. It's okay," I said. "Why do you ask?" "Because you sit in the big chair," Lily said, pointing a dirty finger. "And you look mad. Kings are always mad in the stories." I almost laughed. Almost. "I'm not a king," I said. "I'm just tired. And I'm not mad. I'm just recovering." "From what?" "From a broken heart," I said. I don't know why I said it. Maybe it was the firelight. But broken heart was easier to explain to a 5-year-old than a blocked artery. Lily's eyes widened. She looked at her doll, the one with the stick for an arm. She picked it up and held it out to me. "You can hold Barnaby," she said solemnly. "He helps when things are broken." My daddy broke, and Barnaby helped. The air in the room seemed to vanish. My daddy broke. Not died. Broke. I looked at Rose. A single tear slid down her nose. I looked at the doll. It was filthy. I took it. The stick arm poked my palm. "Thank you, Lily," I said, my voice rough. "I'll borrow him for a minute." After dinner, I retreated upstairs. I lay in the massive king-sized bed, staring at the vaulted ceiling. The wind was picking up outside. It sounded like a freight train roaring through the valley. Usually, the silence of this house drove me crazy. But tonight, there were noises. The creak of floorboards. A lullaby. It wasn't noise. It was life. I fell into a restless sleep. I woke up to a sound that wasn't the wind. It was silence. Absolute, heavy, muffled silence. And the cold. The room was freezing. I could see my breath. I sat up, shivering. I walked to the window and pulled back the heavy curtains. "Oh no," I whispered. The world was gone. White. Everything was white. It wasn't just snow. It was a burial. The storm had dumped at least 3 feet of heavy, wet snow overnight. My rental SUV was just a hump in the landscape. The road was erased. And the power lines? I looked toward the tree line. The heavy cable was lying in the snow, snapped like a piece of thread. No power, no heat, no road. We were trapped. I heard running footsteps on the stairs. Rose burst into my room without knocking, shivering violently. Her lips were blue. "Robert," she gasped. "The heat is off. The baby is freezing. I can't get the fireplace to light." I looked at her terror. It was the primal fear of a mother realizing her cubs were in danger. In these mountains, a house without heat became a freezer in hours. I forgot about the eviction. I went into CEO mode. "Get the kids," I ordered. "Bring them in here. This room holds the heat best."
But do it, Rose. Now.
She ran. I grabbed my cashmere sweaters and wool coats. Rose came back carrying Sam wrapped in blankets, with Lily trailing behind. "Get on the bed," I said, "under the duvet. Body heat is the only thing we have." They climbed into my bed, my expensive sanctuary. Rose huddled in the middle, the kids pressed against her. I walked to the window again. My heart rate monitor beeped. High stress alert. "We have a problem," I said. "The road is gone. The power is out. And the generator needs gas. I don't know if I have any." Rose looked at me from the pile of blankets. "How long until they plow the road?" I laughed. A dark, humorless laugh. "This is a private road, Rose. The county doesn't plow it." I pulled out my phone. "No service. Nobody is coming," I said softly. Lily poked her head out, holding the stick doll. "Is the king scared?" she asked. I looked at her. I looked at the snow that was slowly burying us alive. I wasn't scared. I was terrified. Not for me, but for them. No, I lied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The king has a plan." I didn't have a plan. But as I looked at Rose's trusting eyes, I knew one thing. I wasn't resting this week. I was surviving. The decision to go outside wasn't brave. It was mathematical. Without heat, the temperature inside would drop to freezing within 4 hours. Hypothermia would set in shortly after. I had a 60-year-old heart condition. The baby was 6 months old. We were the weakest links. I stood in the mudroom, layering up. Thermal shirt, cashmere sweater, ski parka. My hands were shaking, not from the cold yet. It was fear. Rose stood in the doorway, holding a dying flashlight. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice tight. "Maybe the power will come back on its own." "It won't," I said, zipping up my jacket. "No crew is coming up this mountain for days. We need the generator." I grabbed a red gas can. It felt light. Too light. Maybe a gallon left. "Stay inside," I ordered. "Lock the door behind me. If I don't come back in 20 minutes." I didn't finish the sentence. "Robert," she whispered, touching my arm. "Be careful, please." I looked at her hand on my expensive parka. "Lock the door," I repeated. I opened the heavy oak door. The wind hit me like a physical blow. A solid wall of ice that stole the air from my lungs. I stepped out. The snow was waist deep. Every step was a battle. Lift, punch, sink, drag. The generator shed was only 50 yards away. Today, it was an expedition. My watch beeped, heart rate 110 BPM. I grit my teeth. "Shut up," I muttered. 10 yards. The wind was screaming. My chest started to feel heavy. Not pain exactly, just pressure. like a large hand gently squeezing my sternum. Heart rate under 25 BPM. I stopped, leaning against a pine tree, gasping for air. Don't stop, I told myself. If you stop, you freeze. I pushed off the tree, 20 yards, 30. The snow was deeper here, drifted against the shed. Up to my chest. I had to dig. I started scooping snow with my gloved hands. Heavy, wet, heart attack snow. The pressure in my chest tightened. It was a vice now. My left arm felt numb. Heart rate, 145 BPM. Danger. Just open the door. I wheezed. I grabbed the handle. Frozen shut. I kicked it. Once. Twice. The ice shattered. The door swung open. I stumbled inside. I poured the fuel in, spilling some on my boots. Come on, I whispered. I grabbed the pull cord. I yanked. Sputter. Die. My vision blurred. My doctor's voice screaming. You are killing yourself. I grabbed the cord again. For them, I grunted. I pulled with everything I had. Roar. The generator coughed, then roared to life. A beautiful, steady hum. I flipped the breaker. The overhead light flickered on. Power slumped against the wall, sliding down to the concrete floor. I just needed to rest. Just 1 minute. My chest was on fire. Get up, Robert. If you sleep here, you die. Lure wakama rating is pre-o. I forced myself to stand. I stumbled back out into the storm. I made it halfway back. I could see the porch. Then, my knee buckled. I fell face first into the snow. I tried to push up. My arms gave out. The cold felt warm now, sleepy. So this is it, I thought. I die in the snow, $5 million in the bank, and nobody to mourn me. Then, I felt hands. Robert. Rose. She was there, in the snow, wearing only pajamas, screaming my name. She grabbed my collar. She pulled. Small, but with hysterical strength. Get up, she screamed, slapping my face. Don't you dare die on me. Get up. Together, we clawed our way to the porch. We tumbled through the front door. She slammed it shut and locked it. The lights were on. The heater was humming. I lay on the floor, gasping. Rose was on top of me, ripping my jacket open, putting her ear to my chest. She was soaking wet, freezing cold, and crying. Is it your heart? Do you have pills? Pocket. I wheezed. She found the bottle. She put a tiny tablet under my tongue. It dissolved. The vice in my chest began to loosen. I looked up. Rose was hovering over me, her eyes wild. You idiot, she sobbed. You stupid, stubborn idiot. You could have died. I got the lights. I managed to smile. She laughed. A choked sound. She collapsed onto my chest. You got the lights, she whispered. We lay there on the floor for a long time, the millionaire and the squatter. I realized something then. Nobody had ever risked freezing to death to drag me out of the snow. Rose, I whispered. Yeah, I think we're going to be okay. She lifted her head. And in that moment, the lines between us didn't just blur. They vanished. Thank you, she said softly. Uncle Robert? We both looked up. Lily was standing at the top of the stairs, holding her stick doll, the hallway light creating a halo behind her. Is the king okay? She asked. Rose helped me sit up. Yes, baby, she said, her voice shaking. The king is okay. He just fought a dragon. Lily's eyes went wide. Did he win? I looked at Rose. I felt my heart beating. Steady. Alive. Yeah, kid, I said. I think I won. But the storm wasn't done with us yet. We were trapped in a house together. And now we owed each other our lives. Time is strange when you are buried under 6 feet of snow. In New York, I measured time in minutes, fiscal quarters, and trading bells. Here, in the white void, time was measured in logs thrown on the fire and the rhythm of a baby's breathing. 3 days passed. The storm raged on, a relentless white curtain that turned the windows into opaque light boxes. We were a ship adrift in an ocean of ice. I should have been climbing the walls, screaming at the inefficiency of the county road service. But I wasn't. I was sitting on the rug in front of the fireplace, holding a needle and thread. Is he going to make it, Doctor? Lily whispered, leaning over my shoulder, her breath smelling of milk and fear. I adjusted my reading glasses. I looked down at the patient, Barnaby, the one-armed rag doll. It's a delicate procedure, Nurse Lily, I said seriously. But I think the prognosis is good. I wasn't using a stick this time. I had gone into my leather bag and pulled out my favorite pocket square. Pure Hermes silk vintage patterned with tiny blue anchors. $300 of fabric. Rose had gasped when she saw me cutting it up. You can't cut that. It's silk. It's fabric, I had replied. And Barnaby needs an arm. Now I was stitching the rolled-up silk onto the doll's ragged shoulder. My hands, which used to shake from stress, were steady. I focused on the tiny stitches. In, out, in, out. Rose was sitting on the sofa behind us, folding my laundry. She wasn't singing today. She was quiet, watchful. There, I said, tying off the knot and biting the thread. I held up the doll. He now had one dirty cotton arm and one gleaming, luxurious blue silk arm. He looked ridiculous. He looked magnificent. Barnaby, Lily squealed. She grabbed the doll and hugged it tight, rubbing the smooth silk against her cheek. It's so soft. It's Italian, I said, winking at Rose. Rose didn't smile. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read, like she was trying to solve a math problem that didn't have an answer. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. That was expensive. Rose, I said, packing up the sewing kit. In this room, that square of silk is worth $0. On Barnaby, it's worth a smile. I think I got a good ROI. ROI. Return on investment. She shook her head. You're not what I expected. For a rich man. And you're not what I expected, I countered. For a squatter. It was a joke, but the word hung in the air. Squatter. It reminded us of the truth. The snow had hit pause on the eviction, but the snow would melt eventually.
Like Robert?
She asked, hesitating. Yeah, when the road clears, what happens? I looked at the fire. I picked up a poker and jabbed at a log, sending sparks flying. "I drive you to the bus station," I said. Like we agreed. "Right," she whispered. "Right. Of course." She stood up abruptly. "I'm going to check on lunch." She walked into the kitchen. I watched her go. I didn't want to think about the bus station. I didn't want to think about the empty silence that would reclaim this house. I told myself it was the Stockholm syndrome of the storm. We were trapped. Of course we were bonding. It wasn't real. I got up and followed her into the kitchen. "Need help?" I asked. Rose was standing in front of the open pantry. Her back was to me. She wasn't moving. "Rose." She turned around. Her face was pale. "Robert," she said, her voice trembling. "We have a problem." "What? Did the generator die?" "No." She stepped aside. I looked into the pantry. It was a large walk-in pantry. When I arrived, I had brought enough food for one man for a week. But there weren't just one man here. There were 3 adults and a child. The shelves were bare. A single box of crackers, 2 cans of tomato paste, a half-empty bag of rice, and the baby formula, the tin, was dangerously light. "I thought there was more," Rose whispered, panic rising. "I've been rationing. I've been eating half portions so Lily could have more." But I looked at the empty shelves. Then I looked at Rose. Really looked at her. She looked thinner. Dark circles under her eyes. She had been starving herself to feed her kids. And I had been eating full bowls of soup, oblivious. Guilt, hot and sharp, pierced my chest. I was a billionaire. I could buy a restaurant chain with a phone call, but I couldn't buy bread. "How much formula is left?" I asked. "Maybe 4 scoops," Rose said, tears spilling over. "Maybe a day." "Robert, if Sam doesn't eat?" She didn't finish. The snow outside was still falling. We had heat. We had water. But we were running out of fuel for the humans. I closed the pantry door. I put my hands on her shoulders. She was shaking. "We are not going to starve," I said firmly. "I promise you." "How?" she cried softly. "You can't magic food out of thin air." "No," I said, looking toward the back door. "But I recall seeing something in the shed when I got the gas." "What, a rifle?" I said. "An old hunting rifle my grandfather left here." Rose's eyes widened. You're going to hunt." "I'm going to try," I said. I had never hunted in my life. I was a man who bought steaks at Whole Foods. But as I looked at Rose's terrified face and thought about the baby with the empty belly, I knew I had to learn. Fast. "Get the water boiling," I said, turning toward the mudroom. "I'm going shopping." I walked away with confidence I didn't feel. The doll surgery was easy. But going out into a blizzard to find food when everything was frozen, that was a suicide mission. And my heart, my damaged, recovering heart, gave a warning thump. It was ready for round 2. The rifle was heavy. Heavier than I expected. It smelled of gun oil and old walnut wood. A scent that reminded me of my grandfather. A man who believed that if you didn't kill it yourself, you didn't deserve to eat it. I stood at the edge of the tree line, knee-deep in snow. The wind had died down, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like the world was holding its breath. The sky was a flat, slate gray. I wasn't a hunter. I was a man who negotiated mergers. I killed deals, not living things. My finger hovered over the trigger guard. My gloves were off so I could feel the metal. My skin was burning from the cold. Heart rate 95 BPM, steady, for now. I had been standing here for an hour. My feet were numb blocks of ice. Go back, a voice in my head whispered. Go back to the fire. You can't do this. But then I thought of the pantry. I thought of Rose's hollow eyes. I thought of Sam's whimpering cry when the bottle ran dry. I couldn't go back empty-handed. Movement. To my left, near a cluster of frozen brambles. I turned slowly, raising the rifle. The scope wobbled. My arms were shaking. From cold, from weakness, from fear. It was a snowshoe hare, huge, white as the snow itself. Only its black-tipped ears gave it away. It sat there, chewing on a piece of bark, oblivious to the man with the gun. It looked innocent. It looked like Barnaby the doll. I swallowed a lump in my throat. Don't look at it, I told myself. It's not a bunny. It's protein. It's survival. I lined up the crosshairs. The hare twitched its nose. It looked right at me. I couldn't do it. I lowered the rifle. I can't, I whispered. I'm sorry, Sam. I can't. I turned to leave, to accept defeat. And then I heard it. Not a sound from the woods. A sound from my memory. The sound of Rose crying in the kitchen. The sound of a mother who had failed to feed her child. Something inside me snapped. Not a bone, but a barrier. The barrier that separated civilized Robert Sterling from this. I spun back around. The hare was still there. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I raised the rifle. I held my breath to steady the shake. Bang! The sound cracked the silence like a whip. It echoed off the mountains, rolling back and forth. The hare didn't move. It just fell over. A splash of red on the white snow. I stood there, smoke drifting from the barrel. I felt sick. I felt like vomiting. But underneath the nausea, there was something else. A grim, hard satisfaction. I walked over to the animal. I picked it up. It was warm. I'm sorry, I whispered. Thank you. The walk back to the cabin was a blur. I didn't feel the cold anymore. When I opened the back door, Rose was waiting. She had heard the shot. She looked at me. She looked at the blood on my hands. She looked at the limp white form I was carrying. She didn't scream. She didn't look away. She walked over to me. She took the rifle and set it against the wall. Then she took the hare. You did it, she whispered. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also with a fierce respect. I did, I said, my voice hollow. Now, do you know what to do with it? Because I don't. Rose nodded. I grew up on a farm, I know. She took the animal to the sink. I turned away. I couldn't watch. I went into the living room and collapsed into the armchair. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. The adrenaline crash. Lily came up to me, holding a drawing. "Did you find food, Uncle Robert?" she asked. I looked at her innocent face. I wondered if I should lie. But we were past lies. We were survivors. "Yes, Lily," I said. "I went hunting. Like the pioneers." "Did you hurt the bunny?" she asked, her eyes wide. I took a deep breath. "Yes," I said. "I did. Because if I didn't, Sam wouldn't have dinner." Sometimes, you have to do hard things to take care of the people you love. Love. The word slipped out. I froze. Lily didn't seem to notice. She just nodded solemnly. "Okay," she said. "Thank you for taking care of us." She hugged my leg. I sat there, the millionaire with blood under his fingernails, and hugged her back. That night, the stew was rich and gamey. It wasn't chicken. But to us, eating by the light of the fire while the wind howled outside, it tasted like life itself. We ate. We survived. But as I looked at Rose across the table, watching her feed the broth to the baby, I realized something. The storm had taken something from me. It had taken my old self. The man who walked into the woods with a gun wasn't the same man who walked out. And looking at Rose, I wasn't sure I wanted the old man back. The sound of rescue didn't sound like a choir of angels. It sounded like grinding metal and diesel engines. I woke up on the fourth morning to the roar of a county plow truck. The storm had broken. The sun was shining with that blinding, mocking brightness only found after a disaster. The world was sparkling. I should have felt relieved. I could go back to my schedule. I could call my cardiologist. Instead, I felt a hollow pit in my stomach. I walked downstairs. Rose was already up. The blankets were folded neatly. The fireplace swept clean. The kitchen was spotless. She was erasing herself. She was standing by the door, bags packed. Lily was sitting on her suitcase, clutching Barnaby. "The road is clear," Rose said. She didn't look at me. She was looking at the floor. "I heard," I said, my voice flat. "We're ready," she said. "Whenever you want to leave." "I'll get the car," I said. I walked out to the garage. I spent 20 minutes scraping ice off the windshield. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was a harsh, irritating sound. I got in. I started the engine. "Just drive them," I told myself. "This is what you wanted. Peace, quiet, solitude." I drove up to the front door. They came out. Rose carried the baby. Lily carried her doll. I put their bags in the trunk. They looked so small in the massive cargo space. The drive to town was 5 miles. It took 20 minutes. Nobody spoke. Not a word. The only sound was the tires crunching on the packed snow. I looked in the rearview mirror. Lily was looking out the window, sad. Rose was staring straight ahead, jaw set tight. She was in survival mode again. The intimacy of the storm, the shared stew, the Uncle Robert moments, they were fading like breath on a cold window. We arrived at the bus station. Just a concrete shelter. The bus to the city was idling, spewing gray exhaust. I parked. I helped them out. Rose stood on the curb shivering in her thin coat. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the envelope. $500. It felt heavy. It felt like an insult. "Here," I said, "for the tickets. And for a start." Rose looked at the envelope. I saw pride war with desperation in her eyes. Desperation won. It had to. She took it. "Thank you, Robert," she said. "For the roof. For the food. For everything." "It was a business transaction," I said. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. "You cooked. I provided shelter. We're even." "Right." She smiled a sad, broken smile. "Even." "Bye, King," Lily said. I crouched down, letting my expensive suit touch the dirty slush. "Bye, Lily," I said. "You take care of Barnaby. His arm is silk. It's not waterproof." "I will," she promised. "Boarding for New York City," the driver yelled. Rose picked up her bag. She adjusted the baby. She turned and walked toward the bus. She didn't look back. I stood there. I watched them hand the ticket to the driver. I watched them climb the steps. I saw Lily's face press against the glass. She waved. A tiny, gloved hand. I raised my hand. I waved back. The bus doors hissed shut. The engine roared. The bus pulled away, kicking up a cloud of dirty snow. I watched it go until it disappeared. I was alone, finally. I had my life back. I got into my SUV. It smelled of leather and new car scent. It didn't smell of milk or lavender soap. It was quiet. Perfectly, beautifully quiet. I drove back to the cabin. I walked inside. It was warm, but the house felt dead. It felt like a museum. I walked into the kitchen. On the counter, sitting next to the fruit bowl, was something that didn't belong. I walked over to it. It was a drawing. Lily must have left it while I was scraping the ice. It was done in crayon. It showed a big house with smoke coming out of the chimney. And 4 stick figures. A mommy, a baby, a little girl, and a tall man with a blue square on his chest. And above the man, she had written in shaky letters, "My Dad." I stared at the drawing. The silence of the house crashed down on me. It wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. It was the sound of a mistake. A massive, life-altering mistake. My heart monitor beeped. Heart rate, 120 BPM. But it wasn't stress. It was panic. I had let them go. I had let the only real thing in my life get on a bus and drive away. "No," I whispered. I grabbed the drawing. I ran to the door. I didn't care about the doctor. I jumped into the SUV. I slammed it into reverse. I floored it. The bus had a 10-minute head start. The roads were icy. I didn't care. I wasn't a businessman anymore. I was a man chasing a bus. I drove like a man who had nothing to lose. The speedometer climbed past 80. The SUV shuddered as it hit patches of black ice, the traction control light flashing like a strobe. My heart monitor was screaming. Heart rate 135 BPM. Warning. I ripped the watch off my wrist and threw it into the passenger seat. I didn't need a machine to tell me my heart was racing. It wasn't racing from fear of death. It was racing because it finally had a direction. I saw the bus ahead, a gray, lumbering beast kicking up snow mist. If it got on the highway, I'd never catch them. I floored the gas pedal. The engine roared. I flashed my high beams. Flash, flash, flash. I leaned on the horn. The bus didn't stop. I pulled into the oncoming lane. I pulled up alongside the bus. I rolled down my window, ignoring the freezing wind. I waved my arm frantically. The driver ignored me. He sped up. "Damn it!" I shouted. I saw Rose through the window. She was crying. I had to do something stupid. I accelerated, pulling ahead of the bus. Then, I tapped the brakes. I drifted the heavy SUV sideways, blocking both lanes. It was reckless. Insane. The bus driver slammed on his brakes. The air brakes hissed loudly. The massive vehicle skidded and came to a stop just 10 feet from my door. Silence. Then, honk. The driver leaned on his horn. I scrambled out, my legs shaking. I ran to the bus door. The driver opened it, furious.
Are you out of your mind? I'm calling the cops.
I ignored him. I climbed the steps, scanning the sea of faces. Rose. I yelled. A head popped up in the back row. She stood up slowly, her eyes red and swollen. "Robert," she whispered. I walked down the aisle. "Get off the bus," I said, breathless. "What?" "Robert, you almost caused a wreck." "I know. I don't care." "Get off the bus." "Why?" she demanded.
So you can say goodbye again. So you can give me more charity money.
"I can't do it, Robert. It hurts too much." "No," I said. "Not to say goodbye." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the crumpled crayon drawing. I held it up. "Lily drew this," I said, my voice cracking. She wrote, "My dad." And I realized something. Lily peeked out from behind the seat. "I realized," I said to Rose, "that I don't want to be the landlord. And I don't want to be the nice man who helped. I want the job." "What job?" Rose asked, tears spilling over. "The job in the drawing," I said. "I want to be the dad. I want to be the guy who fixes dolls and burns toast. I want to be the guy who wakes up to you every morning." Rose stared at me. The whole bus was silent. "You're crazy," she sobbed. "We're a mess. I'm broke. You're a millionaire. It doesn't make sense." "I know," I said, stepping closer. "It makes 0 sense. It's a terrible business decision. But Rose, it's the only decision I've ever made that feels right." I held out my hand. "Please, come home. My house is too quiet. I hate the quiet." Rose looked at my hand. She looked at Lily. Lily was smiling. A huge, gap-toothed smile. "He came back, Mommy," she chirped. "The king came back." Rose looked back at me. She took a deep breath, and then she smiled. "Okay," she whispered. She took my hand. The bus erupted in applause. Even the driver grunted. About time. I grabbed their bags. I carried Sam. We walked off the bus together. We drove back to the cabin. When we walked through the door, the warmth hit us. The smell of wood smoke. The drawing on the counter. It didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like home. That night, I called my doctor. "Henry," I said, "I have bad news." "What? Did you have another attack?" "No," I said, watching Rose make snow angels in the yard. "But I'm not coming back to the city. I'm retiring." "Retiring? You're 45. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to be a dad," I said. "And I have a lot of work to do. The doll needs a leg now." I hung up. I walked outside into the snow. I wasn't the millionaire anymore. I was just Robert. And as Rose threw a snowball at me, hitting me square in the chest, I realized that my heart wasn't broken anymore. It was just getting started.